Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Surratt with the United Way of Greater Cleveland. Julius, thanks for hosting us here today. I think this has been a great, insightful conversation so far. I'm hoping what I'll share brings some of this together and kind of how United Way and like why we're here and how we fit into this discussion. And so I'll tell you, this is a new slide deck, which I'm still learning through. So if I fumble through a few things, forgive me. But I also want to make it more informal as well, you know, the smaller group. But I'll talk a little bit about what United Way is, how we're here, really talk about the shift we made to really focus more on systems change rather than just kind of giving out grants across. We really are focused a lot more on impact than we have been in the past. And one of the great examples that what we call the social determinants of work. I'm sure you all are familiar with social determinants of health. It's it overlaps very much, but we'll tell you why we've taken this focus. It's a little different, and then talk a little bit how you can help, which I think could be a nice to start the conversation. So we learned recently, we're having like, how do we communicate what we do? You know, we don't just give out grants anymore. We saw this TED talk recently. It talks about the best communicators start with the why, like why, then the what, and the how, right? Where a lot of other people do it the reverse. And so we like to start with imagining a world, right? A world where everyone, regardless of where they are, can rise above any circumstances, and that the circumstance where they are now, like through the hard work, and people want to believe that you just got to work hard and everything will happen for you. But I think what we know is that there are systemic and structural barriers that really prevent people from doing that. So imagine that those don't exist anymore, and that people from all over the world, from all different starting places in life, achieve what they are intended to achieve in life. And that's what we hope for Greater Cleveland. And so for over 100 years now, United Way really has been providing immediate relief, basic needs. If people needed food, we help get food. If people if they were unhoused, we help them find shelter. And it's important work. And there's a whole health and human service sector here designed to help people do that. But we realize now it really is just kind of the beginning. It's not enough to just take care of someone's immediate crisis. What we want to do now is think about what caused that crisis, right? Like how do we stop those crises from ever coming about? And so that's where we're really focused. And so 211, I don't know, are people familiar with 211? What it is, we call it, some people, the first call for help, and pretty much for anything. A lot of people think it's just for people of low incomes, but it really is for anyone to call. We've had people call of means who just parent the elderly. They don't know how to get them into a senior living facility. They could be wealthy, they could not have wealth. It doesn't matter, but 211 can help them. Just like they can help people find a local food pantry if they need food. We see as a lifeline. Last year we served over 160,000 calls, just Cuyahoga County. We do provide 211 for other counties as well. But we realized that we can't just be answering the call. We want to be proactive and actually making people's lives better. So we'd actually love to see less calls, to tell you the truth, right? It's what we do, but I'd love to see it go away. And so we can't best be firefighters. What we have to do instead is be gardeners, right? And you heard the references to the soil, right? Earlier today, I really liked it. Dr. Barksdale, he had an image that he'll It's very similar to an image that I'm about to show you right now, right? He just had the bottom half, right? And so what we see at the top half is what we say is the crisis relief at United Way. So that's what we're historically known for. We see a problem, people like want help, they get money, and we help get it to the right place to address that. But the problems don't go away, like they continue unless we get to the stuff at the bottom, the roots. And so this is where we're really trying to focus on the system solutions that help prevent the crises. We want to make that the soil richer, right? We want to make sure that it's not infected, right? What we see is the tree, the leaves might be falling off the trees, right? It's not spraying the leaves, it's not fixing the stuff that you can see. It's really the stuff underneath that we need to focus on, and that's what we're trying to do at United Way. So we talk about like, how is this even possible, right? We live in this time of innovation, AI, everything, everyone's walking around with a phone, right? Like, everyone has one of these things. But we still know so many people that live, we say check to check. But I think that the greater risk, quite honestly, is the people who miss maybe 3 or 4 checks, right? There's a lot more of that. And the pandemic, I think, really highlighted that. The number of people who thought they were solidly middle class, their job ends, and pretty quickly they're the ones calling 211 for that food pantry and didn't know what to do before. In fact, a third of Cuyahoga County residents had debts and collections, 60% live paycheck to paycheck, and almost 2/3 don't have emergency funds. So there's a lot of people at risk. And that's why our goal is really about moving people from poverty to prosperity. And not that we're the ones actually moving the people move themselves. We want to create the conditions, help set the context, remove those barriers, so that people can move to where their definition of prosperity, right? We know that it's going to be different for different people. So that's really looking at we're sick of constantly fighting Detroit for the number 2 spot of poverty. Right? I'm sick of it. And that's what we used to have an old slide, and I'd say this is new. And our new CEO came in and she pointed this out right away. We had this slide, 2 slides. One that talked about, we've given since our inception over, I think it's $2 billion, right, to the community, the fun things. And then the second slide was Cleveland's number 2 in poverty in the country. It's like, what the hell have we been doing? Right? Where's this $2 billion gone? It's not a good way to sell and get people to actually give you money. It's that's a good point. So we've changed slides. And because of that, we're sick of it. We know we want to move the metrics that help inform that poverty statistics. And so the other big learning that we had this year, and I've only been with United Way 2 years, and our CEO since October, so not even a year, is we talked a lot about poverty, and people in the community are like, we're sick of hearing about poverty. What do we do about it? And it hit us. We're like, you know what? What is poverty? Poverty is a measure of income, right? So how do we help people with their income? That's what we should be focusing on, economic mobility. And so we have this graphic of this arrow. I was like, this is the group that we historically have helped, right? These people in crisis, they need food, they're really at the low end of the wage earners. But this economic mobility, this is a group that I was talking about during the pandemic, realized that maybe they weren't quite as, that they thought they were on solid footing, but they could actually fall back. And we said, it's really about keeping people along this journey. That's what we want to do. We want to create the conditions that allow people to move along this journey. and remove the impediments along the way. And with that, hopefully make them more resilient to crisis. So how do we do that? And what can United Way uniquely do? So first is really systems, and I'll talk a little bit about this in the next slide. I think a little bit more about what systems are, but we are, because of our networks and like connections, on board is the corporate community. We work with the health and human service sector, other philanthropy, government. Like we can really help inform and move and bring people to the table to think about systems. The other is solutions. We have some funding, again, with all the different networks. We can actually do some experiments. Like we can help fund pilots. We can actually put the pieces together to help prove out solutions that actually are effective. And then last is results. And this is really about data. One of the most underutilized resources I think that we have in this community is 211 data. So people call us every day. Great example. Last week I went down, we're in different floors from 211, but I wanted to check and kind of just get to see what's going on. And I see the assistant director, and she's just kind of, I don't know, her body language didn't tell me things were going well. So what's going on? She was like, it's 11 o'clock. We already have 500 calls. And I was like, whoa. I was like, that's a high volume. Right? It's like, what's fueling that? It's like rent. People can't pay rent. And then second thing is utilities. Like people are having, like, this is that time of year. People are trying to get in, they're getting kicked out. It's unfortunate because kids are starting school. And so everyone's looking for resources. All the resources have dried up since the pandemic for rental assistance. Landlords are jacking rents up because they can right now. And so I was like, wow, that's the kind of real-time information that we get from 211. Unfortunately since I forget, it's 1979, I think we started it. That we haven't really shared publicly. Like we should be sharing these data points constantly. Like we know. And so I had our data people look back over the last 10 years, housing, food, utility assistance, generally the three biggest areas that people call about, but we can go deeper and like what is specifically around it. And I said, okay, now show me that, and then put in important data points. When was the housing crisis? When the pandemic hit? When did pandemic relief? When those checks start coming? And you can tell by the way that our calls went up and down what happened. People got money, our calls got down, right? When the vaccines came out, our calls shot up. And like, so you can see all these different things happening, and like, wow, how do we get predictive? And I will tell you, that's something that we're going to work on. Like we're trying to get more predictive in this, and it's something we're investing more money and resources into, is our technology, and how do we help inform the systems, right, to create solutions using data, right? So that's what the new United Way is. And so this slide, systems change when we talk about it, policies, practices, resource flows. So, the way I like to think about it is, I think we can do 3 different things at United Way to really help. One is kind of mitigate problems, right? So if that's a little bit of the crisis relief, like how do we make things not as bad, right? So how can we just kind of firm things up so that people aren't backsliding? Secondly, it's really about how do we change kind of current practice, how things work right now to make it better, more efficient, for people to connect to resources, potentially saving money. So efficiency, effectiveness of services outcomes within the kind of the current world that we live in. But as I said before, we know that, there's still structural systemic things that make the current systems not even great, right? So that's where we need to use our advocacy, to change policy, and so it's kind of the mitigation of problems, change of practice, and then ultimately policy change that impacts, and that's what we're really striving for here at United Way. And so one of the ways our initiatives that we're focusing a lot on, this is I think what Julie's heard about this when she visited us, is what we call our social determinants of work. And this was a term coined by Dr. Angela Jackson from, I'm trying to remember, I want to make sure, Future Forward Strategies, but she's also a teacher at Harvard Business School. She said, and easy way to think about it is like, what are the barriers to people working and moving along that spectrum, right? The income spectrum. And as you see, a lot of them are probably very similar. They overlap with social determinants of health. And so this frame has really resonated with us because we feel we can help influence some of these, again, given where we sit. Our board, CEOs or C-suite people in large companies, we can talk to them. It's like, what are your challenges to your workers? Like everyone's like, oh, people don't want to work. People don't want to work. And we needed to shift the narrative. Was a really a reason why I wanted to do this, because we also work with the health and human service sector. Who's like, oh well, we can't, someone won't work because they have to take care of their kids, right? It's the balance. And so with that, here's a little more detail on kind of what they are and what we're pushing for. So we want to help. This is where, again, using the mitigation practice policy levers, you want to, one, make sure if people need food, they have food. That's the big part of the mitigation. If they need housing, we connect them to the housing, the resources that they need. In terms of practice, this is where working with employers is important. So we are in creating an employer toolkit. We've gone around, we talked to different employers, we talked to different workers, a cross sector of different people who are both in the workforce and left the workforce, looking to join the workforce to understand what are all the challenges and how do we address it. And that's where this list is a sampling of those types of things that employers could do, look at. It's like a great example. It was a manufacturing company, shared a story of a worker who kept arriving 30 minutes late, came every day, 30 minutes late. They're having a tough time finding other workers. And they're like, well, they're considered like, fire this person, they're late every day. But instead, they actually talked to this person and asked the question, why are you late every day? Said, well, this is the only bus that allows me to drop my kid off at daycare, and so that I could actually come to work. And so I'm 30 minutes to work. It's the only thing. Otherwise, it's like I can't afford childcare, so it's like my aunt has to watch the kids. It's the only time I can do it and catch the bus. It's like, oh. So that employer then had to think. It's like, oh, well, they could just accept it, right? And it's like, okay, this is fine. And then what they actually did was remarkable to me, was they thought even further about this and said, asked other employers, other employees, like, what if we shifted our start hours back, our shift? Like, we could just change our shifts. As long as our machines are running a certain amount of hours a day, it doesn't really matter what time. Like, what if we shifted the hours? And that's what they ended up doing, because it worked better for all their employees. So not only was it a good decision for the employees, right? It was a good business decision. Now they're actually, adding that flexibility, the time, allowing people, and the workers felt valued, right? And that's the kind of thing they share. What makes them want to be part of the company. And so I gave you an example of a transportation one, but as you can imagine, oh, actually, I mean, had childcare in there too, right? So all these things are intertwined. And we talked to people who were like, which ones do you face? You know, all the issues. And most people had more than one issue that they challenged or challenges for them. And where we see this the most, and this is how we started the conversation. When we started talking about social determinants of work, the first thing we did is just over a year ago, we held a forum targeted towards the broad community, but we wanted to let employers really know. And we realized that most people didn't know what the benefits cliff was. Does everyone here understand what that is? So there are many people who are put in a position when we're hearing from employers that people don't want to work. It's like, hey, I offered them a raise and they turned it down. Why would they turn it down? Like giving them more money. Well, what we found out was that raise, it messed up their childcare voucher, right? So they're actually losing a more valuable resource than that $2 an hour wage increase, right? Which sounds substantial, but ultimately it would make them lose their childcare, which made it hard for them to even work. So explain this to employers has been a big piece of what we're doing. It's going around sharing this again, that access and connection. And so it's helping people rethink what they're doing. And that's where, again, that employer toolkit is going to come in handy. This is just a little bit of a visual example of the benefits cliff. And this is looking at, this is done by Center for Community Solutions, but looking at kind of health career. And so you can see where, you know, the wages for different occupations, but then you see what happens to the various benefits during that time. And so you see a big cliff, you know, you see little cliffs along the low end of the spectrum. And you see this nice, you know, you're earning money, you're phlebotomist now, you're moving up, you're gonna get your LPN. You think that's the right next step for your career, but look what it does to their financial situation, you know. And so that's where we have a hard time getting people through that. But maybe we can find ways, yeah, this is where the mitigation right now within the current system to help get people through. You know, people have been talking about universal basic income as or a guaranteed income type pilot to help people through this this time. But ultimately, we just really need to redo how benefits work. And, you know, that takes both state and federal legislation changes, which we know is going to be a long haul. But ultimately, that's what we're fighting for. So in the short term, we'll try and do some mitigation, work with employers to try and help them understand what they can do. But ultimately, we really want to see the systemic barriers change, because that's what's going to really fix the problem. And that's what we're really trying to do. Ultimately, always is fix the problem, but we may have to take steps to mitigate or change practices first. So with that, I talked about how we taught to a lot of workers or people who left the workforce or want to get into the workforce. And it's really important to really get community input into this, because I feel in our community, we also have a lot of top down kind of policies and things that happen. We really, and we learn. The benefits cliff is the perfect example. Here's what the problem is. Like, you're not going to get the workers you want, because you're not addressing what their issues are. And so we want to make sure that we're centered in the worker, right? The people that we want to help create the conditions so that they can move to prosperity. And so this is what our commitment really is to them. We're first going to create a coalition. That work is starting. We actually are going to look for a consultant soon to help kind of get that off the ground. So within the next month or so. So if you know people, I'll be sure to share with you all the RFP when that comes out. Again, looking at the practices, that's where the employer toolkit comes in, really ask employers to really assess, you know, their own internal practices, policies, and then ultimately again drive more of a policy focused solution, working with that coalition to actually create more legislative change. This is you know, a little bit more about the toolkit, but it really is some external research on what people are doing, but also again talking to local employers and how they're currently addressing it, the issues, and yeah, this is the way in which we're doing it. And I have here how to get involved. Renee Timberlake, who's our director of economic mobility, is really driving a lot of this work. I want to give her credit. She first heard the term from Joe Rizika towards employment, but like Renee has kind of taken it upon herself to say, this is what we need to do. We need to help. This is how we move people, or create that the conditions for economic mobility, is by addressing these barriers to work. And so we had Dr. Ann Jackson come in March to talk at a city club, and it was really well received. A lot of business community there, and they walked away generally positive and understanding that they have power themselves to address some of their own hiring issues, right? Like they need to look a level deeper than they have been, you know, especially given the tight labor market that we've been in. So that was this is a shameless plug. Something else we're doing, just trying to engage people. October 3rd, Stephen Dubner, I don't know if you're familiar with Freakonomics, the book or the podcast. I was actually listening to one on the way here. And what really hit me was, I shouldn't say hit me because there's really not. It was about why the US is so good at pedestrian fatalities, right, than the rest of the world. And I mean, the irony of that, but given when I saw Dr. Bergolius talking about the, you know, the streets and the pedestrian, like, it's like, oh, wow, just listen to a podcast about that, that specific topic. So, so yeah, so anyways, if you're interested, definitely, let me know, or you can use the QR code or whatever to buy. He's really interesting chat, just makes you think about things that happen in the world from a different perspective. So with that, I'll say thank you and open up to any questions that you may have.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So in terms of the research community and what we could do as the CTFE to support research, or one of the things that struck me that you said was about the 211 data. And just kind of top of mind, what kind of collaborations or priorities within that data do you think someone within our collaborative could potentially partner with the United Way on?
Great question. So there's a few things. One, 211 is an anonymous service. So one of the downsides of that is you don't get as much demographic data. You don't have as much understand who. We do get some age, city, zip code. We get on all people. You know, depending on the service that they call about, we might get some more demographic data. So it makes it a little bit hard. And as I mentioned, the trends that we see, you think it's all driven by need, but what we also are learning is that it's also driven by just what is available, what funding or resources are available. And so we're trying to parse out right now a little bit like, well, how much is what, right? So we get more seniors calling than we do younger people. Is that just because of a relic of age, right? Older people are used to picking up the phone and calling rather than, going on the web and looking up something on their own? Is it because there are a lot of services for seniors out there, right? And so we're really trying to figure out why that is, like what. And so we did hire a guy who ran a data shop for a long time to kind of do our initial kind of look at it and try and figure out, clean up our data, make sure we have good data, because we also get data from our grantees, right? So clients served, locations, we get some pretty rich, still most of it's kind of aggregated, but still things that show some need and demand, and some other programs that we run. So right now it's internal, just trying to help, but we want to share with academics. We want to marry that with other data sets, right? More about health, public safety, just all kinds of things. The opportunity is there. We don't have like I said, I think the first step is just understanding our own data before we kind of open it up to other people, but that's the intent. We don't like, it doesn't help us to hold on to that data. It doesn't help the community for us to hold on to those data, but we want to make sure we're saying the right things about it, rather than it lead us a different way. So we have this cycle we're talking about internally. First, if we start seeing some trends, we want to talk to the navigators just to see, like, am I hearing this? This is what I'm seeing in the data? Is this what you're hearing when you talk to people? They're like, oh, well, no. Well, because there have been instances where it's like, well, I just coded this way because we don't have that thing. So it looks like something is bigger than this. Like, oh, okay, that's all that it is. And it's not a big issue. It's just they're coding it that way. Versus, oh yeah, I'm hearing this, and then it's like, okay, well, who do you refer them to? All right, then let's call those people. What are the people telling you? Because they go a level deeper. All right, let's understand that. Let's look at more public data, right? What else are we seeing? Are we seeing other trends that are moving with it? So like that's where I think gets to a point where it goes beyond like our skill sets. And then it's really working with the right partners in the community about like, well, how do we address this? Like, we see this as something that's coming about. How do we be more proactive, or at least quicker to react, right, to what's happening that we're seeing? So there definitely will be opportunity. I think letting us know what data sets exist that you have access to, or things that may be interested in you. So there is a public 201. It's 201oh.org that you can go to and see some of these trends. It's a kind of clunky Tableau thing. We're gonna definitely revamp that and try and make it more user friendly. But you can see some of these high level things by zip code for all the counties that we work in.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I'm trying to think about how to word this. What has it been like transitioning such a large and established organization from firefighting mode to gardening mode? And I'm wondering, is that something that is like a larger initiative at United Way, or is it something that United Way of Cleveland came to on their own? Are there other models, and kind of how have your community partners responded to it? I'm curious.
Great.
A couple questions.
No, yeah, great example. I will tell you, so I was at the Federal Reserve Bank when they announced and we refer to it internally as the pivot. It's when Augie Napoli, our former CEO, came on, and he saw a couple red flags pretty early. One is that we are basically borrowing from reserves to pay grants, right? So we were depleting, so like workplace campaigns are going down. Generally, how historically how United Ways get money is large employers say, hey, employee, give a little bit from each paycheck and do it. Well, we've had a loss of a lot of major employers in Cleveland. And a more recent thing that we see is this actually work from home works against us, and that's more of a United Way worldwide rule, is that the donations go to the community of the address of the donor. Historically, in workplace campaigns, they use the work address, but now people work from home, right? And so they use their home address as their work address. So someone who works for Key Bank that lives in Avon Lake, their dollars now go to Lorraine County instead of Cuyahoga County. So he started seeing a lot of things. One, just kind of the operations, how we do it. We need to take a pause. We're bleeding money. And two, he's like, well, what are the outcomes? He asked the questions like, we gave this $1 billion, right? Over the 100 years, like what's the impact on the community? We still have, and that was kind of a, whoa, hey. So he had to negotiate some pretty tough funding decisions. And so there were a handful of organizations that never had to apply to United Way for funding, just give them hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Some smaller amounts, but some of the bigger ones, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And then, there was a lot of just Cleveland being Cleveland. Some of our board members are on boards of other organizations, right? Well, you're funding that organization, but what about this other one that I'm on the board of? So there's a lot of, and so you can imagine the dollars got spread really thin, and all it did was keep people in business. What Dr. Barksdale said about too many nonprofits, take my United Way hat off for a second. This is Ken Surratt, individual speaking. I completely agree with him. I'll put it back on. We weren't having an impact. We weren't doing anything. So he said, you know what? I want more data-informed applications. We're going to pause a year to come rebuild our coffers so we can get ahead of the bleeding money. We're going to have more data-informed applicants, and we're going to invest more money in fewer organizations. So we went from funding over 100 organizations to the current group of grantees. There are only 16 of them between Cuyahoga and Geauga County, 12 in Cuyahoga, 4 in Geauga. So that was a huge, there was a lot of backlash initially from the community about that. Organizations we funded for decades now getting nothing. And so that was definitely an issue. Talking to other philanthropists, right? Like, why you cut them off? Why did you, now they're coming to us, asking for money. And so I think everyone's through that now. People get it. We're actually in the midst of our second application process, so 2-year period. So this is the second one that we're doing now. We went from 85 applications to 105. So we got more people to apply this year. We are in the process now of kind of whittling that down. There's another step that we only invited about a little over half of those to, a little less than half, I should say, of those to apply for the next round, for the next step. So it was difficult, and this isn't something all United Ways across the world do. I would say there's a network of United Ways. It's more of a federation, right? So you just basically pay for licensing of the name, quite honestly. And the larger metros, you see more of movement like this, but you have smaller rural United Ways. They might fund 3 or 4 counties in Ohio in some rural area, and it really is a small campaign. It might have 3 people working there. We have over 100 people, 140-ish people now in Cleveland, which is considered a larger United Way. But it really was the circumstances, I think, that drove us here. I think a leader that had the courage, right, to call out what the issues were, and do something about it. And now we're taking the next step, with this, and again, this. We feel the funding, the priorities are right. Now it really is about how do we do what we do better, and I think the data piece is the newer piece that's really gonna help inform what we do. To answer your question. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you so much, Ken.
You're welcome.